All right
Alrighty.
then. Well, good morning. This is the 13th of June 2015 live data sheet review. So as everybody knows, my job today, my name is Matthew and this is Peter.
Yes, good morning everybody.
And my job is, as always, to curate the questions and interrupt when it's appropriate and sometimes probably when it's inappropriate. So I can see a lot of old faces here as always, Chris and Malcolm and all those guys. You know, it's always interesting and always, you know, it's pretty much expected now that the highly successful people with our business are always here, not necessarily learning brand new stuff, but having things that are reinforced. So, Pete, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Matt. All right, well, let's get underway today. Early technical glitch. Yeah.
Okay, so can people hear me now? Oh, yep, all good. There you go.
Okay, great. All right. Well, all right. Without further ado, as I said, it's a banker trifecta. Why is it a banker trifecta? Well, up front because the win dividend of the favourite is $1.70, and remember that banker trifecta applies when the win dividend range exists between $1.50 and $1.70. Why? Because we know that when a win dividend of a favourite reaches $1.70 or less than that, it's got to be holding upwards of or more than 50% of the money. And of course, you know, half of all the market money on one runner is a pretty substantial endorsement of that runner's ability to succeed according to the market. So on the strength of that, we go ahead. Just one word here. Sometimes when the win dividend is $1.70, you will find that the percentage will be a little bit less, maybe 49, 48 sometimes, 40% for the favourite. Don't let that dissuade you. I mean, that's still very, very strong money. And so it's the win dividend value that really determines, is the primary determinant of whether a banker trifecta is acceptable or not. So now, second place, as you can see, if you're covering the 80% of the money down to a money gap, covers the next three runners. Now, and that is where you could leave it, given that third's got to go all the way to the bottom, of course, because we're not going to apply any allowances. Now, some observant people might say, well, what about this money here for number 15? It's more than the money for runner one, so couldn't we take that into account? Well, if we go to percentage return, you can see that the location of the separator at 1 reinforces what's going on in trifecta, because that separator at runner 1 is telling us that the cumulative money support over the last 5 intervals has been very, very strong and clearly defined for these three runners. So you have got that sort of that triple layer of money, if you like, or levels of money support. And so on the strength of that, this was considered to be a possible trading opportunity with 30, what is it, 33, yeah, 33 trifectas. Now, wait a minute, I'm just going to check that. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, all right. Now we move on to the next opportunity, and that's MRO1, and of course this would be quite clearly a percentage return if it's anything. And we see we're dealing with, and I'll just take the lock off so we can all see this, we're dealing with a weak favourite, number 5. And of course we all know that we can trade against weak favourites if we choose, or if the relevant indicators are satisfied or satisfactory. And any trading group that we consider has got to be holding at least 47.5% of the cumulative money to start with. And it's quite clear to see that runners 3 and 2, the most money competitive with the weak favourite, number 5, sitting second in the field, are not holding that requisite 47.5% cumulative. So that means that immediately, if we're going to trade at all, we've got to add the favourite to the group. Now, once again, I guess if you looked over here at the 1 minute interval, you could be forgiven for saying, well, you know, there's competitive money for this runner here. But if you look back over the last 5 intervals at the aggregate money, it's quite clearly dominant over the remaining runners in the field. So on the strength of the cumulative money support, this would be a trading race with 3 selections, including the weak favourite. Of course, given us our return is quite substantial at nearly 80%, or possible return. All right, now moving on from there, BRO3. As we can see, it's pretty much stock standard, first and second down to runner 11, and we're going to make a percentage allowance for third. You know, normally the selections would go down to there if you're applying the 50, 70, 90 to red money gaps selection outcome. But quite clearly, the allowance is quite justified here, because look at the substantial reduction in money support as we go from runner 5 down to runner 10, and that gives us 36 combinations. So it is important to remember to apply allowances when all the indicators suggest that it's justified, because very often, as in this race I do believe, you can convert what would have been an elimination race into a winning trading opportunity with prudent application of the allowances, but only when you're satisfied that they're worthy of applying.
So Peter, can I just ask the audience who would have, you know, where did you fall on this? Did you go ahead and eliminate this race, or did you actually take this trade? This is last Saturday,
yeah.
So you know, so a lot of you would have been trading last Saturday. So, you know, did you eliminate it, or did you cut it back and trade it? So if I could just get a little bit of feedback there.
I mean, it is important too. I think this highlights another important point, that priority must be given to the upper field area in races. Too many times people sort of tend to get concerned and paranoid about what's happening at the bottom of the field,
yep,
and ignore the overwhelming dominant money support for the upper field. And after all, that's where most of the winning outcomes comes from.
Right.
And so you can see quite clearly here that of that field of runners, 10 runners in all, I mean, it's the top 5 that are carrying all the money.
Okay.
You know, the bottom ones are it's just beer money, basically.
Well, that's right. There was a substantial reduction there. You got horse number 5 versus number 2, goes from 570 $9 to $75. So Leon saying he did exactly the same, and Chris is doing an exacta for 1 and 3. Okay, interesting. Okay, well, look, thanks very much for that. It's good to get a little bit of feedback there.
Sure.
To really just have everybody see those who may be going through their training or coming back to us after a little bit of a time, realise that there's people out there running this program, taking on board Peter's rules and guidance and really profiting from it.
Yes, I mean, I think the key areas, of course, to look at and focus on when you're making trifecta assessment. First and foremost, the money profile, because it's the money profile that governs what happens over on this side of the field in terms of money gap size and location, and also, of course, this cumulative percentage column. That's most important. So it's sort of the three, going from, I guess, right to left. It's cause and effect. So you're going from money and what has that money caused in terms of indicator presentation and percentages. Okay, on we go.
So I just had Roger say that he had to work last Saturday, so always collect the data. I know that I say this a lot, but I might have one extra person hear me this week. Peter is always collect the data. If you've got better data, you've got a real advantage there. You can go ahead and backfill. So even if a day of racing is finished, go ahead and hit the collect data button. Collect all the days or the races you want to, or the venues you want to actually put that in your database, and you can go and reference that later at date. One of the things that I've been told that's been these particular sessions are of value is when a customer can actually rewatch the webinar, have their own program bringing up the 6th of June, for example, today is the 6th of June, and going ahead and follow the bouncing ball with Peter. Go, oh, I would have done this. What would Peter have done? Then you can hear Peter's not only see his data sheet, but actually understand the explanation, and that really peels back a few more layers for you. So I think that's a really important tool that we've got that I think might be underutilized. Some people have cottoned onto it, but I just wanted to make that point. You've got these sessions. They're all available on our YouTube channel. I haven't hidden them yet, so even anybody can just sort of navigate to the YouTube channel and go and do that. If you're, I also put them on the IQ Pro Facebook page, and I also put them in the link to them in the closed trading group, the Trilogic /IQ Pro trading group. So there's no excuse for not watching these, and no excuse for not having the all the relevant information available to you. So that's my little bit. Back to you, Pete.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I mean, do remember that we put all these I suppose, aids in the support portal for people to use, not just to review once and then forget about, but to revise. And it is most important that you go back and do that revision. I can't stress enough. I mean, because the more familiar you become with all the priorities, the more intuitive you become when you're observing live data. There's no question. So you're picking up on things without even thinking about it. And so, I've had people say, oh, well, I've got sheets beside me with all the guidelines, and my answer to that is, look, that might be okay when you're learning, doing some basic learning, but if you want to trade effectively, referring to a sheet while you're going, while you're in the intensity of trading, is not the most effective way to deal with it. You just won't have time anyway. Yeah. So the more that you review the training aids, the more insightful you become. And I mean, I still, after many years of working with this program, I still pick up on little things. Sometimes I think, oh, I never thought about that before, or I never thought about it in that way. So, I mean, we can all learn something, and that's most important.
Very good.
Okay. Now we move on. Oh,
I think you've already clicked onto MR2.
Yeah,
we talked about this one yet?
Okay. All right, so possible mega factor, as we can see. I mean, the money's okay in the pool, definitely, because of course it's a busy racing period. And win dividend of $2, you know, $1.83 to $2, a money gap requirement bigger than multiple 2 associated with the favourite. Now, if we go to percentage return, you can see we have a separator associated with the favourite substantially bigger, which is always a good sign, because that's telling you that the money support over the last 5 intervals for this runner is very strong. It's sure it's pretty strong over the whole collection period, but in the business end, at the business end of things, it's strengthened and it's consistent, as we can see if we look at the updates here relative to the rest of the field. So let's just see how we went here. Well, it did sort of fluctuate up and down, but you know, back here at 3 minutes it was $2.10, and of course because of the consistent dominant money support, it's dropped now down to the $2 mark. So quite acceptable to consider a mega factor. Now, you'd be at liberty to bring the selections down to number 4 if you so, and leave them there, because you're covering the required 92% of the money, or 90% of the money, I should say. But you know, only 12 combinations have been created at this point. You've got 42 as a maximum. So, you know, as extra insurance, you might think, well, I might as well bring the selections for third down a little bit further, and it just sort of mitigates my risk just that little bit more. Optional choice. So it's important to, as I said, look at the money profile and let the money profile guide you in terms of what selections you feel are most comfortable for you. All right, where are we now?
Hey, Pete, I've just got a couple of comments and questions from people. Chamath is asking how we might be able to get into the program and download the data without being there. You can use programs like Go to My PC. I think they're free. If you've got an iPhone or a tablet or a PC away from your computer, you can set those up and actually go ahead and access your computer online. So that's a way you could probably go ahead and do that. We're not the experts of that. You might want to do a little bit of reading and a bit of research, but Go to My PC is something that I think one of our other clients are using. Rod's asking, how do we make the history window full screen? It's the same as always, which is up in the top right-hand corner, second box in, or the middle box, which should make it full screen. If that's not working, then you might need to have a bit of a play around with some of your settings. Some people have their settings or their resolution on their screen set to a point where you can't actually fit everything on. So you just want to go back to the default or recommended settings on your, whether it's a laptop or a desktop. So try that, Rod. And Chris, thank you. I'll have a look at that. And yeah, my pleasure, Chamath. So that's all. Back
Very
to you,
good.
Pete.
And might I say, Chamath, I did receive your latest data sheets, which is really good. So I'll be looking at them over the weekend, and I'll be speaking to you early next week. All right, good to see you in attendance. Okay, now we go to WRO1, and this is pretty straight up and down. I mean, we're selecting the top 2 runners definitely for first place, 50% to a red money gap, huge money gap, quite clear-cut dominant money support for the 2 runners here. Secondary money down to runner 4, so we're once again quite happy to make a small percentage allowance for third place, and that gives us 24 combinations. And can't see. There we go. All right, so we go up for a percentage return. Now, very clearly, I think we're going to trade with the strong favourite and runner 12, 6 and 12. Favourite, of course, is indicating as being pretty strong. And at the top of the field, we have a separator of requisite size. I mean, it's got to be at least 1.7, and 2.46 is substantially bigger. So that in turn reflects the quite clear cumulative dominance for those two runners there. I mean, the money support at 1 minute is also very strong. It's strong here, pretty well all the way back to 5 minutes. It's as we would like it to be. And most importantly, those two runners together are holding more than 47.5% of the money. So we're quite happy to continue to trade with 6 and 12 as our group.
Just a quick reminder to everybody that that red money gap needs to be 1.7 if you're covering 2, 1.5 if you're covering 3 or more.
That's right.
I can just see a couple of people who are relatively new going through the training in the attendees list, and just wanted to remind you that you need to be 1.7 on that gap. And 1.5 if there's 3 or more.
Absolutely. If you have all the indicators have got to stack up. It's no good to get 2 out of the two mandatory indicators are the 1.7 minimum separator and the percentage of 47.5. If either or both of those are not in evidence, then it's a non-event. Right, back to Doomben we go, and of course you can see, given the quality of racing at the Winter Carnival in Brisbane, you can see how as you go later, as we progress into the later period of trading, the quality of racing of course escalates, and so the chances of finding a suitable trifecta are probably lessening, simply because of the competitive nature of the field. I mean, the money spread is a lot more even, so it takes the inclusion of a lot more runners to make up the 50, 70 and 90% coverage that we require as a basis, and of course that creates too many combinations. So generally speaking, the main trifecta action on a very good day of racing will happen earlier than later. Doesn't mean it won't happen later, but I mean they're not as frequent, simply because of that competitive money spread.
Looks like a Melbourne Cup field, doesn't it? $5.60 favourite.
Yeah.
But then you've got the 12th horse down is only paying $17. So everybody's got a chance in this race.
Yeah. So I mean, not that it matters to anybody that's got no interest in racing, but to all the hard-bitten punters out there, of course, Stradbroke Handicap is one of the major events, Group 1 events in Australia. But I mean, that's got no relevance when we're using this software. So
I'm giving Peter. I was giving Peter a bit of a blank look there, thinking, "Oh, okay, maybe heard of that."
And in case you think I'm a racing buff, I know nothing about racing. I know how to look at the good-looking women at the track and place a couple of dummy bets, but that's about it.
Perving on Women's another webinar that Pete and I will host later on.
That'll be a much longer one.
That's right.
All right, so
sorry for all the ladies in attendance today. We'll clean it up.
We're just kidding around. All right. All right, so here we.
So Peter, seems you've got some interest in the Perving on Ladies webinar. Thank you, Chris. We'll book you in on that.
Right after this webinar, we're going out to do some advanced research.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, now getting back to what we're
here for,
we should be doing.
Yeah.
Here is a trifecta happening, and it's just the basic 50, 70, 90 selections. Now you can see that the top 3 runners are holding 68.3% of the money. So in terms of percentage, that would put that group in the category of a possible second place percentage allowance, 67.5 through to 70. But of course we also require the money gap, defining money gap of the group, to be 1.7 or bigger, which of course it clearly isn't. So what we're going to do is trade along just sort of basic group selection lines, 50, 70 and 90 to red money gaps, and you can see that the money profile very much, that selection outcome best accommodates the prevailing money profile. So that gives us 54 combinations, which of course is less than the maximum requirement of 60 if you're making group selections. And there is our final trading race for the 6th of June. Now, what I'd like to do, can I just...
Yeah, get rid of that. So I'm just Pete's just closing the quick. Don't press that button. May I take over for a sec?
Yeah, for sure.
Just going to dock it because if you close it, I think it goes away. So there we go. Is that what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the data sheet.
Right, yeah.
So we'll just go down here. Now we always, I suppose, this has become a bit of a
cliche.
A bit of a soapbox subject for us, but it's very important, and what I'm going to reinforce once again is the need to be proactive in terms of monitoring your progress on any given day. There is no absolute requirement to trade for the whole day. In fact, that's probably not the right way to go about it. You've got to determine or have some sort of idea of what sort of profit you would consider to be too good not to accept and protect. And so with that in mind, when you get a good quality day that produces profit, particularly early on, such as you see here, surely even at this early stage in MRO1, you'd be thinking about, well, with two trading outcomes, I'm, with a $400 betting amount, that is, I'm up to $882 profit. Now that, I think, in anybody's book is a pretty reasonable level of profit to make, particularly, well, let's see, just to break it down.
You can't click away.
No, that's right. I'll just get rid of this. Hang on. Just do it there like that. I just want to sort of bring this back to where we were. It's not gonna there we go. Okay, so there's the first race of the day, and there's MRO1, right? So, we've started at 11:20. Within an hour, we're up to $800 in profit. Now, that's not a bad, level of income, I would suggest, on an hourly basis. But if you went, if you decided that this particular race, BRO3, that was the one where we made the percentage allowance, and which was thoroughly justifiable, you've picked up another winning opportunity, and now the profit is up over $1,000. Now, surely that would be the absolute time to say, well, I'm exiting. I'm closing things, or I'll continue to collect data. But as far as serious trading for the day, that's it. That's my limit. Take the profit, protect that profit, and then whatever happens after that will happen. I mean, don't sort of ever fall into the punting frame of mind where if you've made $1,000 in a matter of 4 or 5 races, you can maybe make 2,000 or 3,000 in the next 4 or 5 races. That's the wrong approach to take. You've got to say, well, with minimal trading activity, I've produced a very, very favourable profit outcome for myself. I'm happy with that, and I'm not going to risk it and go any further. And as you can see here, it was a pretty successful day right to the end. But if you hung on to the bitter end on this day, you've gone from the dizzy heights of $1,200 to $1,025 in profit down to 246.
You'd feel a bit of a deal, wouldn't you, Pete?
You'd feel a real deal.
Yeah.
You'd feel a sense of great deflation, I would think, as your profit sort of whittles away. So, you've got to be savvy with this. You've got to have in the back of your mind what is an acceptable median of profit that is too good not to cause you to exit and take that profit. And so don't sort of be too ambitious, but don't be too limiting either, because remember that we all know that there are some days that aren't so hot, and you've got to take those into account. So you're sort of averaging out your income. And so that's just a very good example. That's why I picked this day, quite apart from some of the selections, was that it very much highlights the need to do that, to benefit from that sort of self-analysis. And so, as we've said many times, you trade confidently, but also be prepared to not trade equally as confidently if you feel that the opportunity just doesn't stack up fully after total scrutiny of all the key indicators.
Right.
So that's pretty much it for today.
Short and sharp one. It's about half an hour. So let me just go ahead and change the screen, if you don't mind, Pete, to see if there's any questions that people have. And now is the time to ask them if you have any. Let me just break that out. Yeah, so Chris is saying that we stop at CR3 with a daily profit that we'd predetermined, so pretty much reinforcing what we discussed. And and for those younger or newer players out there, Chris has had the program for some 16 years, so and been profitable every year, and that's why, because there's a business plan attached to it. So Shirley is saying you were betting 400, then dropped by 200. I would say that was because the trade was a percent return trade. We take $200% return trades and $400 trifectas. Now, we also talk about some people, you go, right, well, I'm happy to have a certain amount of profit. Then you can actually also move the amount that you bet to protect your profit. Let's say, for example, you're up 800, you want 600 out of the day. Well, then you've got $200 left over. You might choose to trade the next trade, whether it's trifecta or percent return, with that extra $200 to sort of give yourself that chance to win without actually cutting into the $600 sort of low tide mark or low water mark that you actually want to achieve. Isn't that right?
Yeah,
Ben?
absolutely. And I think it goes to the point I made before too, Matt, that sure, you can continue to trade, but in a I suppose a selective manner.
Yeah.
So that if you see, say, a percentage return where the top two runners have got all the money on them, and the money's been there right from 5 minutes out, 4 minutes out, 3 minutes, and all the indicators stack up, and the two runners at the top of the field, a strong favourite with its own separator and one other runner, and they're the two runners that are standouts in terms of money dominance. Well, then you might think, well, blow it, I'll trade this because I've, as far as the money support's concerned, I've got to have a strong probability of being successful. Yeah, so it's all about that selectivity that we speak about.
Perfect. And Matthew's asking, is trading in New Zealand races recommended or not? We don't really trade New Zealand races because, well, at the end of the day, we're looking at the races through the lens of the New South Wales TAB, which means people who are betting. See, there's not people in New Zealand betting on New Zealand races because they'd be more in the know, but we're talking about Australians and in particular New South Welshmen betting on New Zealand races, so the level of knowledge would be lower and the amount of money would be lower as well. So, we also use the prize pool as a strong indicator, and that's why, people are asking me all the time about Hong Kong races, Singapore races. Well, that's great, but we don't have the people in Australia, in New South Wales, betting on those races overseas to create a realistic reflection of the market.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I see Chris Roberts says
Chris Roberts says he agrees with you, Peter, which is nice. That's why we keep Chris around, especially on major race days. The races early should give one a good profit. As the day goes on, it gets more difficult. And that's not, and that reinforces what you were saying earlier, Peter, about higher quality races maybe later on, but also you've got to take into account the human factor of there's some racing systems out there that will avoid the last race of the day because people need to have a punt, and which might actually probably for the same reason Melbourne Cup is not a race we bet on, let alone of course the fact that it has 24 horses in it. It's just that people are having a punt at that stage of the day. They're not probably necessarily making a considered decision.
Yes, that's a good point.
And Peter, it is of course also, sorry, Chris, it's also for your good looks. That he's wondering why else we keep him around.
Yes.
So look, if there's nothing else, so no other questions, Karen. Yeah, look, we do try to provide value, and we are always looking for new ways of explaining the same thing because I have studied martial arts for a number of years, and I'll go from one instructor to another, and something will click, not because he said something different, he said the same thing in a different way. And so that's why Peter and I do this so often, well, every 2 weeks, and have done so for the last year or so. It's just so because we might have a way of saying it in a different way, or somebody might ask a question that will shed new light, and that will enable us to provide you with that sliver of something different. You go, oh, yeah, now I get it. Exactly. So, Roger, our pleasure. We always love doing these. So if there are any questions throughout the week, you can always hit reply on these webinar things. I get those, and so does Peter. Hit reply and say, hey, what about this? Or could you do this? We had some people a little while ago say, hey, can you show races from a 5-minute mark down? We might do that in 2 weeks' time, Peter.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll do that. And so, if you've got any, we do take requests.
Some people wish that we'd take them a lot further away than we normally do.
That's right. Anyway, well, look, on that note, if there's no other questions, comments, or thoughts, I'll sign us off, Pete.
Yes, that's great, Matt. And thanks very much for your attendance today, folks. Always a pleasure, and we'll look forward to your company in a couple of weeks' time.
Very good, and we'll see you, who's ever part of the Adelaide group. I'll see you online in about an hour or so, because we've got part deux of the live. What are we calling this? This is the.
I think this
escapes me.
Yeah. Well, this is the workshop.
The workshop, yes, of course, the workshop. Goodness, I need more sleep or something. So yeah, we'll see everybody for this part 2 of the workshop in Adelaide in about an hour. But until then, thank you very much, and everybody have a great racing day.
And bye now.
Bye now.